on and back to you. Ben, sorry, I'm sort of find the right button there.
Sure thing. So we're going to have a little look at what's going on in the NHS and some interesting individuals who've come across my path over the past couple of weeks that I wanted to just flag up. So the first one is this fella, Professor Mark Britnell. And he is quite a serious person when it comes to UK healthcare. He spent 20 years in the NHS from the start of his career, rising to Director General of the Department of Health, and was also a member of the NHS Management Board up until 2007, 2009. So that would have been under both Tory and Labour governments that he was working. He then spent 13 years and 3 months at hang on a minute. Where are we? There it is. Fantastic. 13 years and 3 months at KPMG, where he worked in 81 countries on 440 separate projects with teams delivering strategy, policy, operations for public, private sector healthcare. And he actually grew that to the point where healthcare became 22% of total global revenues, with 55,000 staff working across 145 countries for KPMG. Yeah, really, really serious global healthcare guy. He's also now a member of the Board of Trustees at the King's Fund, which is one of the primary advisors and think tanks inside the NHS or linked to the NHS. And he is also the professor at the Global Business School for Health at UCL. Oh, makes me shudder when I hear those words together, business and health in the current context. Really bad news. Now, I came across this guy because someone shared or someone commented on that I'm connected to this post. This one of the things I love about LinkedIn is these sort of interconnections that you can find. And he put this post up saying that it was great to catch up with his good friend of 30 years, Sir Julian Hartley. He had the pleasure of establishing NHS providers 20 years ago, which was originally called the NHS Foundation Trust Network, of which Julian is now the CEO. We talked about a wide variety of issues, including the productivity puzzle in healthcare, now accounting for 43% of all government spend, up from 26% in 1999. Health must help power economic growth, which in turn will produce more tax receipts for further investment, a virtuous circle indeed. This is the argument that we're hearing. We heard it from West Streeting last week at the Blair Foundation, and we're starting to see this crop up absolutely everywhere else. They're going to start asking for more and more money to be put into the health service on the basis that they've created some models that tell us that if you put in £1, you get £10 back, right? Doesn't work like that at all. The ideal budget for the health system would be zero, yeah? Not putting more and more money in, particularly not given what we've seen them do over the past 4 years. And we already know that they have 195 billion. This is him crowing about the scale of this market. If we can get this back up on the screen quickly, I'm just going to look at that final paragraph. Yeah, so harnessing the 195 billion spend across the NHS, unprecedented amount of money. You're talking about about 350, 400 pounds per month per taxpayer, right? This is the kind of budget that we're talking about. 1.5 million people employed, and it's going to be mission critical for economic growth across the UK. And these two people, with their long and storied and illustrious careers in public and private healthcare, are getting together to talk about the future of the NHS. And I would love to have been a fly on the wall in that conversation. So too would Rich Corbridge, Director General at the Department of Work and Pensions, responsible for digitisation of the DWP, probably working with Tony Blair. We talked about the DWP and Blair programme last week, who I have actually met a couple of times, and he seems to have unfriended me on LinkedIn. I can't imagine why that might be. Anyway, Julian Hartley. So we've talked about the professor at UCL, the former KPMG guy. Let's have a little quick look at Julian Hartley, because to me, we talk about public-private partnership. This is where it really happens. Yeah, you're talking about two individuals, one in the NHS, one in the private sector, long-time friends, long-time collaborators, talking about how they're going to stitch up the future of a £200 billion captive marketplace, which is our health service, right? This is how they talk about it. So what's Julian Hartley up to? So he is the chief executive, or actually I should say Sir Julian Hartley as well, by the way, right? This is a guy at the top level of the establishment. He's the chief executive of NHS Providers. It describes itself as a membership organisation for the NHS hospital, mental health community and ambulance services. I mentioned this organisation to someone, a contact of mine, super intelligence, and he basically said that it was part of the dismantling from the inside process. When the NHS Foundation Trust Network was introduced back in 2004, that was part of the dismantling of the NHS from the inside. It was part of the public-private initiative agenda, turning individual hospitals into small businesses so that they could raise capital, sell off assets, do all those things that states should not be doing with public assets, right? And these two gentlemen sit right in the heart of it, and apparently they're in London to celebrate the King's speech and the agenda for the future of the health system. He's also this guy Brewer, neo-Marxist. There's this video of him talking about white allyship, on which, no one in the health system should be talking about this stuff. Talk about healthcare, talk about patients. Just leave this neo-Marxist doctrine behind, please, for the sake of absolutely everybody. We know that these public-private marketplaces don't work. They deliver absolutely no value at all, apart from to the people who are scamming them. The Blair PPI scheme, the one that they're referencing, we know now in hindsight, cost £300 billion or thereabouts for infrastructure projects with a value of about 55 billion. Yeah, so we paid 6 times over the odds because of public-private partnerships, and that's what they've placed right at the heart of the future plans for the health system. All of this is a continuation of the Build Back Better life sciences vision that was set out by Boris Johnson. It's exactly the same agenda. Nothing about it has changed at all. And what's that going to deliver for? It's going to deliver for big pharmaceutical companies. I've shown this photo a few times, and I've spoken about Starmer and Georgia Gould in the context, but the fellow on the right there is Tom Keith Roach. He runs AstraZeneca in the UK, and he's been very excited over the past couple of weeks because he can see that Wes Streeting and the Department for Health are on a mission to bring closer unity between the way life sciences and the NHS collaborate. Their ambition at AstraZeneca is to bring 20 medicines to market by 2030 in this country. Right? Their COVID vaccine was removed from the market because it killed nearly 1,000 people, and yet they're hanging around with Keir Starmer and talking about putting 20 more novel medicines into the market by 2030. And actually, when they talk about economic performance in the health service, this is a lot of what it's about. It's shareholder returns for UK PLC, aka the big pharmaceutical companies, and they do that by introducing ridiculous, as we've seen with COVID, pandemics. But also, I just received this job specification from the Wellcome Trust talking about becoming a strategic engagement advisor at the International Pandemic Preparedness Secretariat. Very highfalutin name. And basically what that's about, it's about the 100 days mission, which has been agreed by the G7, which says that in the first days of a pandemic threat being realized, the following interventions should be in place: accurate and approved rapid point of care diagnostic kits. Yeah, so big market in testing, an initial regimen of therapeutics. So big market in therapeutics, and vaccines ready to be produced at scale for global deployment within 100 days in the context of this public-private marketplace that the Labour Party is perfectly happy to stand behind. And Wellcome, as we know, run until very recently, I think it was last year, by this fellow, Jeremy Farrar, author of Spike. That's his book about the pandemic. You can see what he thinks about it. And actually, I think Mike, you were saying earlier, he left Sage because it wasn't aggressive enough in pushing the lockdowns. And Farrar is now at the World Health Organization trying to drum up the next pandemic. Let's have a little listen.
The current outbreak, for want of a better word, in America amongst cows is really concerning as well, and also talks to this issue of transmission. We have to understand in those cow settings, sheds, how H5N1 is transmitting, because it may be evolving into transmitting in different ways. Do the milking structures of cows create aerosols? Is it the environment which they're living in? Is it the transport system that is spreading this around the country? So this is a huge concern, and I think we have to watch, more than watch, we have to make sure that if H5N1 did come across to humans with human-to-human transmission, that we were in a position to immediately respond with access equitably to vaccines, therapeutics and diagnostics.
The health system is in big trouble.
Yes, undoubtedly. We'll talk a bit more about that and extra as well. And Debbie, just to finish off, you have a little bit of video for us.
I do. And this was 7 years ago. This is Klaus Schwab. He's talking to Sergey Brin, who was the co-creator of Google. And just want to remind people of what he said would happen in 10 years, bearing in mind that this was 7 years ago. And for everybody, read my blog. It's very relevant. Have a look at this video.
So big data, digital tools at the service of medical and biological progress and advancing very fast. But can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel.
Yes, well, that's very prescient, perhaps, but we'll talk about that in extra as well. So, Debbie, thank you very much for that. Thank you to everybody that's joined us today. Thanks to Ben and Debbie for contributions. We will see you in a few minutes if you're a UK column member for extra. Otherwise, I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday at 1 p.m. as usual. Bye-bye.